Hello there, School Dude Clem, as some of you think I say. It's School Dude Clem, but because I always talk too fast, it sounds like I say School Dude Clem. Anyway, it's School Dude Clem here, also known on this channel as the Music Wizard, and welcome to my Open Mod Plug Tracker Guitar Sample Pack. Now, unlike most people, this isn't a cut-down version of a full product that I'm releasing here. This is actually the full thing, and it's completely free. So just like all my other sample packs, it's completely free, and you can download it via the link in the description. Okay, now this is the 37th attempt at trying to get this recorded, because I always talk too quickly, and I slow my words when I'm reading from a script, and I sound robotic, so hopefully 37th time is the charm. So, before we get into the meat of the video, the folder that says My Guitar, I just want to glance over the other stuff first. So, first off, crappy guitars. These were mainly free VSTs that I sampled, and various other guitar samples I got from God only knows where. And when I say crappy guitars, I don't actually mean they're crap, they're just not as good as the paid stuff, and certainly not as good as the samples I've done. Some of this stuff is also very old. If I play these, you might even recognize some of the sounds. Next off is the sampled from various VSTs. Like the folder said, these were sampled from various VSTs. I don't remember which ones, but I had like a fully functional free trial of each of them. It was fully functional for like 7 or 10 days or whatever. So I just sampled the hell out of them while I still could. And as you can see here, there's 4 different guitars, each one in its own separate folder. Oh, it's actually starting to rain. That makes a change. Now, one thing I want to talk about is how some of the sounds of these 4 guitars were sampled. So, for instance, if we go into the 7-string one, and I load up, let's say, 7-string pluck, and we take a look at the samples, you can see that each sample has 3 instances of each note. 2 short notes, and 1 long note. Well, this was my early attempt at trying to capture the round robins. There's 1 round robin at the start of the sample, the second round robin is at offset 028, and the third round robin is at offset 056. And you can use the offset command in the pattern editor to get each one. So, leaving it blank will give you the first round robin, putting 028 in will give you the second one, and putting 056 in, of course, will give you the third one. Now you could also do this with sample cues. If we take a look here, you can see that sample cue 5 lines up exactly with where 028 is. And for the offset at 056, you can just move any of the other sample cues. You could use 1, you could use 6, you could use 9, you could use anything really. So I'm going to use number 9. I'm just going to line that up to with where the third round robin starts. And it's good to go. I should add that not all sounds have been sampled 3 times, just some of them, such as plucks and staccatos. So before we get to the part that we're all interested in, my guitar, let's take a look at some of the effects plugins. This is stuff like your amps and a few other various effects. These are basically all my go-to effects that I use, although nowadays I prefer to use OpenMPT's built-in effects. So you just put these files in your VST folder and you should be good to go. I do have a tutorial on how to install these, but that's in another video, and if I find it, I'll add a link. So, finally, let's move on to what we all came for, my guitar, which is pretty self-explanatory. First off, I just want to briefly go over the original Ultimate Mod Plug Tracker guitar sample library. This is the first guitar library I ever released, and it's included here. This is just like how the other 4 guitars were sampled, with the 026 and 028 and 056 offsets giving you the different round robins. The font names are pretty self-explanatory, but one thing that might look confusing is the fast picking. That's basically repeating notes that are synced to the song's speed, almost like a slow tremolo really. So fast picking speed 4 is what you would use if the song's speed is set to 4. Fast picking 5 is what you would use if the song's speed is set to 5, and so on. Of course, if you're using a tempo that doesn't match, then this isn't going to work. But what you could do is set the sample cues to where each plug is. It doesn't really matter if the sample cues are a little off. You're shredding like you've taken 10 hits of whatever and you've had a few, there's going to be a little human error, so yeah, doesn't really matter. Makes it sound more real. I tend to do this offset thing anyway. I generally choose the fast picking that's slightly slower than the song's speed. Then I set the sample cues, and as you can see here in the pattern editor, I have them count up to 8 and then restart. And with a good amp selected, it can sound like this. Right, now that's all out the way, on to the good stuff. So, you may have noticed there are folders called bridge plus middle, neck plus middle, and so forth. So, what's all that about? Well, bridge plus middle was recorded with the pickup selector switch in the 2 position, which mixes the bridge and middle pickups together. And the neck plus middle, this time the pickup selector switch was in the 4 position, which mixes the middle and neck pickups together and produces a totally different tone. There's also one called neck, which was just recorded from the neck pickup alone, and there's also a Powerchords folder, which as you can guess is Powerchords, also recorded from the neck pickup alone. You may have noticed on the bridge plus middle and the neck plus middle, there are folders called high hand position and low hand position. So what's that all about? Well, in the low hand position, the notes are played more like how you would normally play them, with the notes being played near the nut. In the high hand position, the notes were played a little further up the neck, which produces a different kind of tone, and also it makes the falls a lot easier to do. So anyway, these are sampled in the more normal way, with each round robin of the notes in its own separate file, except for the short sounds, such as note offs, staccatos, and other short sounds like that. So what are all these short sounds? Well, let's take a look. So here in the bridge plus middle folder, you can see we have a finger stop, a note off, a pit noise, a pick stop, and staccato, all of which are short sounds. And as before, if we load any of these in, you can see that there are 3 instances of each note. The only difference here is that now, round robins 2 and 3 line up perfectly with the default sample cue positions 4 and 8. Okay, but what is all this note off and finger stop and all that kind of stuff about? Well, when you play an instrument and you stop a note, it doesn't just abruptly cut off. No, there's a little bit of a transition between when the note is playing and when there's silence, and that's what I've captured here. So, finger stop is where you put your finger on the string to stop it vibrating. So here is a note that just abruptly cuts off. And here's that same note, but being stopped with the finger stop sound. Hear the difference? Pick stop is basically the same, except instead of your finger, you're using the pick. And again, this is how a note sounds with the note just abruptly cut off. And this is with the pick stop sound. As for the note off, it's a bit like the finger stop sound, except the string is lifted off the fret, but your finger is still on the string, so it dampens the sound until it stops. So again, this is what the note sounds like abruptly cut off. And this is how it sounds with the note off. This is actually a trick I use quite a bit when doing slow playing, like in a jazz song, rather than just have it like this. Which sounds ghastly and fake AF. If I add in the note off noises in between the notes, we now get this. If I add a little bit of note delay in there so there's less space in between the notes, we now get this. And finally, let's just add a little bit of vibrato. Sorry, I mean vibrato on an amp, and now we get this. Much nicer, and much more realistic. You may have noticed that I put the stop sounds on a separate channel, and I stopped the original note with a note off command. Well, this way you get a nice little fade out of the note while the stop sound plays. And although you could do all that on the same channel, sometimes you get a nasty click sound in between the sounds. So that's why I do it this way. And so you could also make staccato notes this way. But why would you want to when a real staccato has already been recorded? Oh God, stupid voice cracks. It's not like I'm a teenager going through puberty or anything. I'm way past that, so I just have a weird voice. Anyway, let's do some slides. So we have a grace up and a grace down, where it slides up to the note being played, or down to the note being played, respectively. So if I play a D with the slide up loaded, it will play a C that slides up to the D. If I do the same thing with the grace down, it will play an E that slides down to, in this case, the D. And when used well, you can get something that sounds like this. Sorry, Joss, for plagiarising one of your songs here. Mind you, that is pretty much what I do. But what about a fifth up slide? Well, we won't find any of those in the low hand position folders, but in the high hand position folders, there are up slides and down slides. So for a slide up, we need to load in the start and end parts of the slide. The start just plays the initial note, and the end plays a slide up to whatever note it's going to end on. So let's make the start note, I don't know, let's just do a D again. And as this will slide up by a fifth, the end note is going to be an A. And there we go. We can even make the starting note shorter or longer. Again, I put the actual slide on a separate channel and stopped the original note with a note off command again, so we get that little crossfade in between the two sounds. But what about doing a full? Well, that's very easy. For our initial note, we'll just use a normal pluck sound. Okay then, I'm going to have to re-record this narration, because although I did the narration and the actions from the same script, while I was editing the video, what I was saying was in no way whatsoever matching what was going on the screen. Oh, if you're wondering why the sound quality is so awful right now, well, my microphone has just died, and the only microphone I've got that still works is an old carbon telephone microphone, which I've just got connected directly up to the computer's microphone input. But at least you can hear what I'm saying. So, the new narration. So to do a full, for our initial note, we just load in a normal pluck, and for the full, we load in the full sound. So, I'm going to make our initial note a G, and because the full sound falls from whatever note you're playing to whatever's a fifth below that, if I make the full also a G, it will start at that G and fall down to a C. If I made it an A, it would fall down to a D. If I made it a B, it would fall down to a E, you know. And that's how you do a full. This thing really needs a pop filter. Anyway, hopefully there's no more narration to replace, so back to the good microphone. And if your head is spinning from confusion now, I suggest you take a little break from this video. So the slides work exactly the same in the middle plus neck library as they do in the bridge plus middle library, but in the neck only library, it's a little bit different. Now there's no high hand position in the neck only library. This is a library I made some time ago before I'd even thought about doing a high hand position. Having said that though, there is a set of high hand position plucks, and they are used for the starting note of the full. And if we take a listen to what these sound like, compared with the normal plucks here, you can hear they sound quite different. So to do a full here, or a slide down, or whatever you want to call it, we'll load in the start and end sounds of the full, and with this library, the end sound actually slides down to whatever note you're playing. So if we try to do the full the same way that we did with the previous libraries, you know, the bridge plus middle and neck plus middle, it's not going to work. It's going to sound like this. And as you can tell, that's not quite right. So to make this work, all we need to do is make that end note a fifth lower than what the starting note was, and now it sounds right. The slide ups work in the same way. So for our initial note, we'll just use a normal pluck sound and put the slide up at a fifth higher than what that note was. And yeah, there you go. And for anybody asking, yes, the short sounds such as the staccatos and note offs work exactly the same as they do in the bridge plus middle and middle plus neck libraries. You know, with the second and third round robins lining up with sample cue positions 4 and 8. But what's this trimmed folder all about then? Well, that contains shortened versions of certain sounds. For instance, the grace up and grace down here is just the slide part without the initial note. Other things such as mutes and plucks. The pick noise at the beginning has been removed so notes can be played faster. Or faster. Come on, faster! Before we move on, I want to talk about the power chords. Like I said, this is a set of power chords I recorded from the neck pickup, and I just decided to throw them in. So yeah, when you want to rock out, here they are. even do some jazzy chords with this, even though that's not what they were intended for. For instance, if I play a G and a B together, that sounds nice. Or a G and an A sharp, or B flat, whatever's your preference. That also sounds pretty nice. Now, I'm going to go through a few tricks that I use. So first I want to revisit the note off sounds trick. So sometimes when there are long notes playing, I prefer to have a lot more silence in between the notes, if that makes sense. It's just that normally when you're playing slow, you just tend to do that. So basically the longer the notes, the more silence I'll put in between them. So short notes barely get any space in between them, if any, and long notes get more. So as you can see here, there's a long note, and here's the space, and here's a short note, and a short space. And here's a really short note with no space. And yes, I know, I got lazy by using a sample cue to simulate hammer-ons and pull-offs, but I am using the note off here. When there's repeated notes, I'll use the pluck while string is playing sound. Basically, I recorded the same set of notes multiple times, but without stopping the string playing between each note. So it's just basically one pluck after another. In the long run, we can do this. Sometimes I'll put a small note delay on some of the notes, just to try to humanize the timing a little bit. Another thing is, when it comes to note bending, when the guitarist stretches the string to bend the note, I could just use a pitch bend here. It has the same effect. In this little bit here, there's a couple of trills here and there, and I found it easier to just make a copy of the instrument that's loaded in, and then just use the pitch envelope to produce the trills. Kinda sounds like a hammer-on, but without having to load in the hammer-on sound. Sometimes I'll make notes run into each other, which, can often happen accidentally in real life. But it can sound really good if you do it on purpose, in places where the notes are a fifth apart from each other. If there's a lot of short notes altogether, it's good just to have random notes run into each other, although I rarely do that. And finally, when there's a sequence with a lot of notes played relatively fast, I'll often use hammer-ons or pull-offs. So if the next note to be played is more than 3 semitones higher or lower than the previous note, I'll put the note in normally, otherwise I'll use a hammer-on or a pull-off. And of course, where the notes are long enough, I'll just do the note off trick instead. Anyway, with all that in mind, let's turn this boring, unrealistic sequence of notes into a shredding masterpiece. So, this is how it sounds right now. First thing I want to do is get this sounding nice and gritty. So, first I'm going to load one of my go-to plugins, and I'll apply those to the 2 guitar channels. Now I'm just going to make a few adjustments, so I'll turn this up almost all the way, turn this one down a bit, change the cabinet, and that should be good to go, so let's give it a listen. Okay, just need some verb. The classic delay will work good here. I'll set the sync to 1.6. We don't need this much echo, so I'll dial that down a bit. Now all I have to do is link the two effects together, so the amp plays through the delay. Well, we got all the notes and everything, but this isn't exactly like how a guitarist would play it. We need things like slides, legatos, and other stuff, so that's what I'm going to do now. So, first thing I'm going to do is take care of the trills. Now, here it's just going to be easier to do these with a pitch envelope, so for this part here, first I'm going to make a copy of the instrument that's loaded in, like so. Then I'll make a pitch envelope that jumps up a half step. This can be a little tricky because I need to get this time just right. So the jump up is where the next note would be. I think that's about right. Maybe just a little more this way. Now what I want to do is, because this part of the song alternates between two notes, it's going to be very obvious that this is the same sound. You know, I don't want that machine gun effect. So what I'm going to do is load in round robins 2 and 3 of the pluck and apply the pitch envelope to them as well. Another thing I want to do is just randomize the timing of the pitch envelopes just to try to humanize it a bit. So I'll make this one happen a little earlier, and I'll make this one happen a little later. Now that's done, I'll just change all of these to one of the instruments that has the pitch envelope. I'll get rid of every other note here, since we won't be needing them, since the pitch envelope is going to take care of that. I wish this would delete the instrument number as well when you delete the note. It takes twice as long having to do 2 passes. Anyway, let's hear how that sounds. Okay, good. Now just randomize the round robins a bit, so we don't get that machine gun effect. And let's see what we got now. Now just do these two near the end. This one does a quick up and then back down. And there's one here that does a short down and then back up. And again, I'm going to redo these with pitch envelopes. So again, I'll make a copy of the instrument. Now I'll make a pitch envelope that does the short trill. This might take a little while, so I'll speed this up. Now I'll just make a copy of what I just did, but instead of going up, it's going to go down. Now just to delete this crap and put the 2 new sounds in. And there we go. Let's hear it. And there we go. Now let's take care of the bends. For the most part, I'm going to leave them as they are, except in places like here where we have a grace up, and in places where we have a fall. So, first of all, I'll just grab a fall, and I'll put it where the downward pitch bend is. Of course, I'm going to have to remove the pitch bend commands as well, since we won't be needing them, and this is pretty interesting. if I put an S9F command in where the pitch is supposed to go back up again, it will start to play in reverse, making the pitch go back up again. You know, like a guitarist sometimes does in between phrases. I have a few more falls to do here, so I'll put those in. And now I'll replace these pitch bends with the grace note samples. And I think we're done with that. Now I'm going to replace some of the notes with hammer-ons and pull-offs where they're needed. So, as you can see, this note here and this note here are only 2 semitones apart, and as the second note is a higher note, I'm going to change that to a hammer-on. And with these 2 notes here, as the second note is 2 semitones lower than the first note, I'm going to change that to a pull-off. Here though, we have 2 notes that are like 5 semitones apart, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. Anyway, now I'm going to go through the rest of the song and change each note to a hammer-on or a pull-off where it's needed. One thing I want to point out is that you don't want to make every new note a hammer-on or a pull-off. So, you know, after every 2 hammer-ons or every 2 pull-offs or hammer-on followed by a pull-off or vice versa, just use a normal note. Mumble so much. Just use a normal note. Normal note. Having said that though, some rules are meant to be broken. That note there is more than 3 semitones higher than the previous note. Well, let's just put a hammer-on in there anyway. Hell, let's put some more in randomly to mix things up a bit. I don't know why, but my microphone is getting louder and louder and louder, although I haven't changed the settings, so I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's trying to compete with the neighbour's music, I don't know. In some places there's going to be repeated notes, so this is where you're going to want to use a pluck while string is playing, and yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. Now these notes here are quite far apart, you know, there's more time in between the notes, so I'm going to put a note off sound in between the notes. And I'm also going to use a note delay command here to just to close the gap a little. And speaking of note delay, I'm going to randomly put note delays on some of the notes here just to randomize the timing a little bit, to make it a bit more humanized. So, after a little bit of tweaking, this is what we got. So let's see what we've done. Well, let's hear it. Of course, this is no substitute for a real guitarist, but this is about as close as we can ever hope to get, so yeah. And I must say that I think I went out of my way here to sample just about everything. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I think this has things that even the paid professional VSTs don't have. Speaking of which, how much is this going to cost you? Well, like all my other stuff, this is free. It's not a cut down version of a full product, because that's what everybody seems to think free means these days. They seem to think that free means cut down version of a full product, but this is the full thing and it's free. It's not a time limited trial or anything like that. It is the full product. So many times I've downloaded something that claims to be free only to find it's a light version of a full product, and I hate that. I'm not a monster. I don't hide things behind a paywall or anything like that. I do full stuff for free. The rest of the internet may have forgotten what the word free is supposed to mean, but I sure haven't. And this is also royalty free, so you can use this in your own project. Well, all my stuff is royalty free, so you can use these in your own music or whatever. So it's completely free to download and use. Speaking of downloads, which I will put a link to in the video description, it's just a simple, straightforward download. There's no sign up required, no login required, no passwords, anything like that. Just a straightforward download like downloads used to be and like they still should be. I'm old school. I do things the way they used to be and the way they still should be. Lastly, before I go, I'm really interested in making a VST version of this. However, as I basically have zero programming skills, there's no way I could do this myself, or I would have done so. So, if you are interested in making a VST of this, it's got to meet certain requirements. First, it must not require contact or anything like that. So many times I've downloaded something that claims to be a free plugin, only to find out that it needs an expensive sampler plugin that might not even be compatible with OpenMPT Tracker, which is what I use. And speaking of compatibility, this guitar VST, if you do choose to do it of course, it has to be compatible with OpenMPT Tracker. And thirdly, most importantly, it has to be available for free. I cannot stress that enough. Of course, I will provide the samples, and maybe even design the GUI, so if anybody who knows how to do this stuff and would like to do so and give it a go, then let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's about it for now, so until next time, goodbye. And so you could also make staccato notes this way. But why would you want to when a real staccato has already been recorded? And there we go. No, not slash, dot. Did I press the slash key? No, I did not. I pressed dot. So put in a dot instead of a slash when I press dot. Stupid computer. Oh, wait. Wasn't supposed to read that.